Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. Back here tonight after Purdue's win over Penn State. It's Sunday night as I record this. Purdue basketball had a gut check week this week after falling to Rutgers on Monday and then passing that gut check with flying colors as they hit the road and got two straight road wins, taking down Ohio State and Penn State. They might drop from number one in the AP poll tomorrow morning. They probably will. Whether they should, I don't know. But there is a ton to like about this team after two really big wins. We're going to talk about all three of those games. Going to highlight some of the reasons for Purdue's success this week before looking at what's next and a look around the Big Ten landscape as, for Purdue, they're already a quarter of the way through the Big Ten schedule. Quick reminder, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, at Boilers Beyond. Have had a lot of fun hearing from you guys there, engaging with you all on the Twitter sphere, so be sure, please, give us a follow at Boilers Beyond, and feel free to reach out, as always, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Available anywhere, Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever it is. We're there, so be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss anything. On last week's podcast, I talked a little bit about the 65-64 loss at home to Rutgers that Purdue suffered. We had recorded that on Tuesday after the Citrus Bowl, but really had made that football-centric. If you missed that, go back and listen. If you have the stomach to listen to more Citrus Bowl content, I'm sure you probably don't at this point, but if you do, that's available. We talked a little bit about that, and it really presented a tough challenge for Purdue, and my goodness, did they answer the call. They came from behind to win 71-69 at Ohio State, and then here, less than an hour ago as I record this, they used a massive run to start the second half to win pretty comfortably, 76-63 against Penn State inside the Palestra. Really cool environment there, really tough environment that Purdue handled. And, I guess just to get into thoughts here, what a way to finish that week. I tweeted after the Ohio State game that wins like that, coming from behind, hitting a big time three and then getting a stop, that's the type of game that in March you look back on and say, man, that's a win that helped us win this Big Ten championship. Every win helps you get there, but that win really stands out. And I think now that you've gone 2-1 for this week, after a home loss on Monday, a good Rutgers team, probably not a great Rutgers team, a team you probably beat more times than not. You bounce back from that, though, go away from home, and pick up 2 wins. That is something you look back on as a stretch that won you the Big Ten. Of course, that's hypothetical. I have no idea if Purdue's going to win the Big Ten. We'll talk about the league later. It's weird this year. It's a little crazy. I don't know what's going to happen, but I wouldn't say that anything is impossible. 15 games to go, but that stretch there is the type of stretch that wins you the league. Purdue lost that game against Rutgers in the first half when Rutgers was able to get the lead up to 10, I believe it was. Maybe they got it to double, into 11 or 12. I know they peaked at 13. Purdue lost that game because of the deficit that it faced early on, and then while it came back, while it got into it, it wasn't able to overcome that. Purdue almost had that same thing happen to it against Ohio State. Now, it looked quite a bit different in that game. Purdue was able to take the lead with, what is it here now that I look at it? I guess really right out of halftime. Purdue was able to take that lead. So soon after halftime, I should say. Purdue was able to take that lead. Purdue put itself in a pretty bad position there. Purdue got off to a really slow start. Purdue turned the ball over a lot. And what you've seen with Purdue, when they aren't able to knock down three-point shots, teams absolutely collapse on Zach Edey. And that's what was happening in that first half against Ohio State. Ohio State was completely collapsing on Zach Edey. Purdue wasn't hitting three-point shots early on. They ended up figuring that out. They made 13 of them on the game, a major reason why they won. But in that second half, after they'd knocked down some shots, Zach Edey was able to get going. Purdue wins the game. You saw a little bit of the same deal against Penn State, where Purdue turned the ball over too much in the first half. And it wasn't the way it was against Ohio State, where they were trying to get the ball inside and made some mistakes there, although Brandon Newman did have one where he threw it right into a double team. Purdue just had some careless turnovers that led to Penn State going on a run. Jalen Pickett was unbelievable. Purdue played two of the best players in the conference this week in Jalen Pickett and Bryce Sensabaugh from Ohio State. I think Sensabaugh is probably going to run away with Big Ten Freshman of the Year at this point. Maybe I'm wrong. Jalen Hood-Schifino is playing well at IU of late. Braden Smith's been phenomenal at Purdue, more to come momentarily. But Sensabaugh is a spectacular player. And I think Jalen Pickett might be the best guard in the conference. What he did in that first half was spectacular. He hit some really, really tough shots. Matt Painter kind of talked about after the game. Penn State hit a lot of tough shots. Seth Lundy banked one in. Pickett had a couple of scoop shots, a couple of step-back fadeaways. Penn State played a great first half, but Purdue came out of that, out of the halftime and force-fed Zach Edey. I think the first halves are a little bit concerning. You don't like going down double digits to Penn State, double digits to Rutgers and Ohio State. And what they get down, 7 or 8 today against Penn State. You don't like having to claw out of those, but when Purdue goes on a run like they did to start the second half, my goodness. That was just spectacular stuff. A really good win. And when you look at the totality of this week, because that's sometimes what you just have to break things down to into the Big Ten. You can't look at the big picture too much. You will throughout it as a fan, you will throughout it, when trying to project it, but all you can really do as a team is go week to week. And 2-1 was probably the most likely outcome, but man, you could have gone 1-2. The difference between winning and losing in those Rutgers and Ohio State game, razor thin there. Purdue goes 2-1. That's big time gut check stuff. Purdue passed that gut check with flying colors. Some major credit to this team for how young they are. Going away from home and getting those 2 wins, my goodness, that is remarkable, remarkable stuff. In terms of young players going away from home and playing absolutely spectacular, Braden Smith, freshmen are not supposed to do what Braden Smith does. Freshmen are not supposed to be that comfortable with the ball in their hand the way Braden Smith is. He was unbelievable against Ohio State and Penn State. Those were elite performances. You look at his stats against Ohio State. 16 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, 1 turnover. And you look at his stats against Penn State, 15 points, 6 boards, 7 assists, 1 turnover. What more can you want from the guy? 31 points. I should have done the math ahead of time. 31 points, 13 assists, 2 turnovers, and 2 away games in the Big Ten as a true freshman. My goodness. I mean, it is remarkable. He didn't have the best game against Rutgers. He struggled a little bit. He didn't, he had some turnovers, a little careless, but man, Matt Painter pointed it out too. Matt Painter mentioned in a press conference that he thought it was Braden Smith's worst game. Clearly, Braden Smith responded quite well. He is mature beyond his years, both physically and mentally. He's been unbelievable. His scoring is something that I think is interesting because early on against Penn State, it almost looked like Penn State was daring him to score a little bit, and I think he's getting more aggressive. You saw him in both Penn State and Ohio State. He took 6 3-pointers, went 3 for 6 in both games. What's been really interesting to me is I watched him a fair amount in high school, and he took a ton of shots. Took a lot of 3-point shots, some of them probably not all that advised. He has been really, really disciplined in the shots he takes so far. He's been spectacular. Shooting the ball, he's Purdue's best 3-point shooter. He was 44% going into the... No, excuse me, 43% going into the Penn State game. That's probably, going to be up to 43%, 44% now. He's been excellent. You cannot say enough about him. How confident he is going into the lane and throwing the ball up for Zach Edey, in an alley-oop or just an unconventional pass to utilize Edey's height. You don't see that from freshmen. His basketball IQ is just off the charts. I thought, something that we sometimes forget about is the way recruitments happen. It's worth questioning if Purdue has Braden Smith, if Jameel Brown hadn't decommitted from Purdue to follow Micah Shrewsbury to Penn State. I don't know if Purdue does. I don't know if Purdue takes another guard there. If I remember right, Cam Heide might have been committed at that point. I'm trying to remember the timeline, but I don't know what Jameel Brown's going to become at Penn State. It is far too early to judge a player's college career, but Braden Smith had 16 points, 15 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists. Jameel Brown didn't play. So or I guess he did. He played 2 minutes there. Didn't see that. Recorded a 2 trillion. So it's too early on to judge his career, but so far it looks like that could have been a blessing in disguise for Purdue. And what's there to say about the other true freshman who's in the lineup? The confidence that Matt Painter has in Fletcher Loyer is pretty remarkable. He really struggled at times this week. Early on in the Rutgers game, I didn't think he looked great. Early on in the Ohio State game, the first 5 or 6 minutes of that game were really, really, really rough. He missed a number of shots that, were open that weren't really close. He turned it over a few times. A number of things that, you don't love to see. He put it behind him. He put up all 11 of his points in the second half, went 3 for 6 from 3. Really, really high-level stuff from him. That confidence from Matt Painter. 2 times this week, he went to Fletcher Loyer for a game-winning shot. That was the idea both times, was if he had the, if the help came off of Loyer for Zach Edey, that Lawyer's going to take that shot. He knocked it down against Rutgers. It didn't end up being the game winner because Cam Spencer hit it. He also knocked it down against Ohio State. And then Purdue did a fantastic job on that last defensive possession. Braden Smith, mature beyond his years there. Probably should have been a foul on Ohio State, too, on that screen. But, nonetheless, Ethan Morton was big there, too, after forcing the steal. It's been an up and down season as a shooter for Fletcher Loyer so far. To this point, what is he shooting here? 33% going into Penn State, so probably up a little bit from that. What'd he end up going? Went 4 for 7. So yeah, it'll go up a little bit. So say 34%. That's not great. It's not bad. But with his ability, you expect that to be better. But he's hitting shots at big times. And look what he's done in Big Ten play. Not necessarily from the 3-point line against Nebraska, but he won Purdue that game. He hit massive shots down the stretch against Rutgers and Ohio State. And then he was brilliant for Purdue against Penn State. 17 points. That's, his second or third most on the season. 4 for 7 from 3. I mean, that is really, really high-level stuff. He's been great. You can't say enough about those two guards. We're getting to the point where those two, Smith and Loyer, are going to have to play a whole lot of minutes, and it's going to come at the expense of David Jenkins and Brandon Newman. Really roller coaster week for those two. It's hard, and you have to admit, it's hard when you're a bench player to really get in the rhythm of things and to really be consistent because your minutes aren't consistent. David Jenkins did a nice job of staying ready. I thought he was really good against Ohio State. Went 3 for 3 from 3 off the bench. Say that 5 times fast. But he was great there, but he was a non-factor in the other 2 games. And then you look at Brandon Newman, a guy who had some big shots over against Rutgers, had some poor moments in that game. He was sick against Ohio State, it sounded like. He really struggled in his 4 minutes and then didn't play because of illness. And he really didn't have a great game against Penn State either. So with those two, it's such a roller coaster. Not that it's not with Purdue's starting guards, but you do have to wonder what those minutes are going to look like moving forward. They're still going to play. They're still going to get, I'd assume in that 10 to 15 minute range, but what Purdue has in those starting guards is really, really good. And don't underestimate Ethan Morton. Please, do not underestimate him. Do not look at his scoring numbers and think that tells the entire story. He was big time for Purdue against Ohio State, and he was really big for Purdue in the second half against Penn State. Purdue was very quick to switch on Jalen Pickett in the first half. Most of his damage happened in the first half when Ethan Morton had been switched off him. You saw him hit some shots over Zach Edey. You saw him hit a couple against Brandon Newman, against Braden Smith. I think he had one against Caleb First. When Ethan Morton was on him in the second half, he really wasn't able to get too much going. He had 8 points, but it wasn't the dominant performance that he had in the first half when he had 18 points on 11 shots. He did a nice job of slowing down Jalen Pickett. He's Purdue's best defensive guard, and it's not close. He's a better three-point shooter than what we've seen so far this year. And as a whole, he knows what he's doing out there. He's a heck of a leader for Purdue. He's a critically important piece of this team. Zach Edey's National Player of the Year campaign is going strong. It's going very strong. It felt like he had maybe a down game against Rutgers and Ohio State, and he had 16 and 11 and 19 and 11 in those 2 games. So yeah, real down games. And then of course against Penn State, he came out and had 30 and 13, just absolutely dominated that game. Penn State couldn't do a thing to stop him. And you saw the impact he can have early on in that second half when he had like 12 quick points out of the locker room and just turned that game on its head. Penn State had momentum late in that half. They went into the locker room up by 6, and Purdue flipped that thing so quickly, in large part because of Zach Edey. Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith, a Caleb First three helped too, but Zach Edey is what did it. I think if you're, again, holistically, this was a hell of a week for Purdue. This was excellent. A loss was going to come at some point. It just was. There hasn't been an undefeated team in college basketball since 1976. I don't think there's been an undefeated team in the Big Ten, just in Big Ten play. Man, I mean, I can't think of the last time. I'm trying to think here. 05 Illinois didn't do it, and I don't think there's been one since then. I mean, it's been a long, long time. It might be 1976. That loss was going to come at some point. And how Purdue responded to not allow those losses to stack was quite impressive. I think if there's something to be concerned about, it's those turnovers. Purdue turned it over a lot trying to feed the post. That's such a big part of Purdue's offense. They have to be better and not allow that to be something that's consistent. This team is so good on the offensive glass that when you turn it over, you're not necessarily only missing one chance at the basket. Sometimes you're missing a lot more than that. And that's what really hurts when you turn the ball over. Purdue doesn't force a ton of turnovers on the defensive end. They're not designed to. So you can't really get in this game where you're turning the ball over and the other team isn't. That's not a recipe for success. I don't always like comparing this year's team to last year's because they're very different in roster construction. Mentally, they're night and day different. But last year's team doesn't do this. Last year's team, at the end of the season, they walked out of... I'm looking up the Big Ten basketball standings from last year. They walked out of that Kohl Center having lost to Wisconsin on that Chucky Hepburn prayer, knowing that they were going to finish 14-6 in the Big Ten and not win the conference. And if you look at how things went, and if you look at how that came to be, it's because Purdue didn't take care of business in games like this. It's because Purdue lost in late game situations. It's because they turned the ball over too much. Last year's team didn't have that it factor. I don't know that this year's team certainly does, but what Matt Painter is doing with this group so far is absolutely remarkable. I think, the season's going to play out the way it plays out, and the way it plays out will define how we remember this season. But to be 15-1, and it's the halfway point of the season now. It's a 31-game regular season, so you're just over that halfway mark. To be 15-1, to be 4-1 a quarter of the way into Big Ten play, this is a masterclass by Matt Painter. Absolute brilliant job. He has been spectacular. You can't say enough about this. And I know there's always going to be the group of folks out there that doesn't like Matt Painter for whatever reason, but this has just been remarkable. To do this with two freshman guards and a third guard that's not a big scorer, to do this with having lost arguably the most talented player he'd ever coached and some really productive guys like Travion Williams and Sasha Stefanovic. Man, the roster turnover, the way this has been done, my goodness. It's what a start for Purdue. Purdue may lose that number 1 ranking. They probably will. Whether they should or not, to each their own. I'm glad I don't have to fill out an AP ballot because it's hard. Houston's good. Kansas is good. These teams are good. There are a lot of good teams out there. UCLA is good. But Purdue's right in that mix. This week kind of validated that after not playing well for a long stretch. Man, just great, great stuff. Moving forward, Purdue has some time off here. They have 4 days without a game, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That'll be nice. It's not some massive extended time, especially after 3 games in 7 days, but it'll be good for Purdue to get a little bit of rest, get a little bit of practice time in before a 7 p.m. tip at home against Nebraska. And then from a podcast cycle, that next Monday, Martin Luther King Day, they've got a mid-afternoon 2:30 p.m. tip at Michigan State. So the next podcast will be after that Michigan State game that evening. Purdue's seen Nebraska once. They probably know what Nebraska's going to throw at them. We saw what Nebraska did last time. They absolutely sold out on Zach Edey. Every time he touched the ball, they rushed half the team at him, made him get rid of it. Purdue didn't shoot the ball well, yet it was still enough to win that game. On the other end, it almost worked. It was an effective game plan for Nebraska. Had Fletcher Lawyer not, really taken that game over a little bit, maybe had that questionable call, Braden Smith handling the ball gone the other way, you don't know. Anything could have happened, but I think you should feel good about that. It'll be the first game in a month that you have students back in Mackey Arena. I think that can make a difference. Get them back in there, get them loud. Maybe Casey Tominaga will go crazy again. I don't know, but this is a Nebraska team that got blown out at Michigan State last week. They just skated by Minnesota. They did beat Iowa. They blew Iowa out. So they're not bad. They're definitely Hoiberg's best team, but I think Purdue should feel good about that matchup. And then, they go to Michigan State, and I have no idea what to make of them. They had a lot of injuries early on, but they're healthy now. At least they seem to be. I think they are. I can't claim to be an expert on that roster, but I think they are. They've won 6 games in a row. They just beat Michigan. They beat Nebraska. They do have a tough week here. They go at Wisconsin, at Illinois before hosting Purdue. That is certainly not easy, but it was a big-time win for them to beat Michigan at home. They maybe shut Hunter Dickinson up for now. They're playing well. Tyson Walker is starting to play like that guy they expected him to be when they added him out of the portal from Northeastern ahead of last season. Purdue's had their problems at Breslin. Last year, they turned it over a million times and lost on a last-second shot. I think that was Tyson Walker who hit that. I remember back to the Elite 8 year, 18-19, when Purdue got run off the floor there. It's not an easy place to play. So that's going to be a big test. It should be rocking in there. With it being a holiday, Michigan State should have that place loaded up with students. That place gets going. Going to be interesting to see that game because Michigan State tends to let Purdue's big men have big games against them, but then they want to limit the guards to almost nothing. How does Purdue deal with that? And, how does that work? Last year it was okay. I remember Zach Edey had a big game. I don't remember what Travion Williams did. But I remember Purdue's guards were horrible, and Jaden Ivey turned it over a lot. But I don't know how that works this year. Zach Edey's improved. I don't know who they throw at him. I suspect that Izzo's going to do a lot to try to get Braden Smith confused, try to put a lot of pressure on him to make mistakes in different ways. Izzo's a heck of a coach. He's got something ready. That's going to be a big test for Purdue. That's going to be a really big one. So Regardless though, at 4-1, you're in a good spot in the Big Ten. Obviously, at 15-1, you're at a great place overall. You look at the conference here and I guess, only a few teams have played 5 games. Most of them have still played 4. But, what do you make of this race? Purdue's at 4-1, and then at 3-1, you have Northwestern, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Michigan. I just don't know. Northwestern's 3-1. I don't think that's real, but I think this Sunday, fully encapsulated it. Northwestern goes to Indiana and wins. Iowa, who looked dead in the water for a while, goes to Rutgers and wins. Ohio State, who I was fully ready to declare a Big Ten contender after that Purdue game, goes to Maryland and loses, who had looked really bad of late. What do you make of this? Indiana's dealing with some real injuries. Xavier Johnson, Race Thompson. That doesn't help. Illinois looks like a mess. Sky Clark's leaving the team. I don't know. You hope everything's okay there, but everything seems weird at Illinois. I thought Ohio State and Rutgers were contenders. Maybe they are. Michigan State, you never count them or Wisconsin out. You can absolutely never count those two out of a Big Ten race because that's when they'll get you. But outside of Minnesota being the worst team, and I think you can probably pencil Nebraska in towards the bottom, probably pencil them into that Wednesday night of the Big Ten tournament. Outside of that, man, I don't know. I don't know. This is it's a good league. I don't know how high end the top of the league is. I think Purdue's really the only team that looks like they could be that right now, but there's still a long way to go. There's still 15 or 16 Big Ten games left for most of these teams. We'll see how things go. Going to be a blast to watch, though. It's going to be a blast to observe. College football comes to an end on Monday, so it's all college basketball from here to the end of March into the first weekend of April. I can't wait, folks. It's going to be a lot of fun here. Be sure to follow wherever you get your podcasts. We got so much to talk about here throughout the end of the basketball season. It's going to be a lot of fun. Follow on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. Come join the conversation there. Because that's all I got for today. Tweet me your thoughts, though. We'll try to do some Q&A. I may do a midweek episode. I'm torn on that. I want to have football stuff to talk about. Some transfer portal decisions. Brady Allen coming back to Purdue was certainly big. Folks told me he was going to Louisville. I never believed it. So I don't know about that. We'll see if we have something to talk about, though. If not, we'll be back after that Martin Luther King Day game against Michigan State. We'll have plenty to talk about with 2 games there. But yeah, thank you guys for hanging out with me. Appreciate everyone who listens. Until next time, enjoy the games. Safe travels to those coming to that Nebraska game. And take care, everyone.